Tonight on KQED Newsroom, coronavirus cases soar in California's Central Valley. We hear from lawmakers in the region about the surge and its impact on farm workers. Plus, extended unemployment benefits for millions come to an end. A key member of Congress talks to us about the crisis. And 1,000 Cuts, a new documentary profiles the struggle of journalists under attack in the Philippines. Welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Priya David Clemens. This week, Governor Gavin Newsom announced state assistance to contain, quote, alarming coronavirus outbreaks in California's agricultural heartland. The state will deploy 3 teams to 8 counties in the Central Valley to boost contact tracing, testing, and outreach. The state will also provide $52 million in federal aid for affected communities there. Essential workers in the agriculture and meatpacking industries, who are mainly Latino, are especially vulnerable to getting sick and dying from the disease. The Fresno County Health Department says Latinos make up roughly half the county's population, but account for nearly 70% of COVID-19 deaths. With me now by Skype from Cambria is Fresno City Council President Miguel Arias, and joining by Skype from Fresno is Steve Brandau, Vice Chair of the Fresno County Board of Supervisors. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks, Priya.
Thanks for having us.
Miguel, you're a former farm worker. I'd like you to tell me, please, about the conditions that make it so hard to contain the virus among farm workers.
There's 5 conditions that are very specific to farm workers. They include living in high-density, substandard housing with intergenerational living conditions, the fact that they're uninsured and have limited access to health care. A lot of them have pre-existing medical conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, and they live in a basin that has the highest pollution rate in the country. They also don't have access to paid time off, and a problem with language access for testing and tracing. And more importantly, they have all been declared essential workers and have been given no direct support at the federal level to remain home when they do become infected.
So, Miguel, what would you say needs to be done in order to limit the spread of the virus among farm workers?
We have to treat them like essential workers, like frontline workers, like medical workers. We need to provide them relief when they can't go to work. That means housing relief, medical relief, and ensure that they can afford to remain at home when they get infected and that they have a support system. We also need to ensure that they have access to testing and tracing, not from 8 to 5, but where they're working and on the fields where they're picking our crops and packing our food in the processing plants. Without that direct relief for them to stay home when they're sick, without testing and tracing at the workplace, they will never be able to get the access to the necessary health care they need in order to curb down the infection rates of our county.
And Steve, Fresno County, the county you represent, has more than 13,000 active coronavirus cases. It's the most heavily impacted county in San Joaquin Valley. There have been reports of outbreaks at meat processing facilities in your county, as well as neighboring Merced and Kings counties. What requirements, if any, does your county place on reporting coronavirus outbreaks at meatpacking and agricultural facilities?
Thanks, Priya. So Fresno County is by far the largest county in the Central Valley. We cover over 6,000 square miles. We're roughly the size of the state of Connecticut. So we have a lot of rural community as well as the city of Fresno, our largest city. We've done a lot on all of the issues that you addressed with Miguel and with meatpacking. The requirements from our public health department and our public health officer are that if somebody tests positive for COVID-19 or believes they have it, everybody that's worked near that person in the same shift, in the same location of the facility, needs to be told that they have come in contact with somebody that's got tested positive, and then they are then required to stay home and take time off of work. It doesn't mean that we shut down the whole plant or even that every employee of the plant would be notified, and our public health director says this is a case-by-case service.
And Miguel, you've heard from workers at some of those meatpacking plants. What are their concerns?
You know, that's exactly one of the primary concerns. And I'll give you an example. One meatpacking plant employs 2,500 people under one roof. Amazon employs 3,500 people under one roof. If you only notify the person to the right and to the left of you, you are far too late to be able to contain the spread. And that's the challenge that we're seeing. That's why there's been such a big spread in those meatpacking plants, in the ag processing facilities. And it's really important for the general public to also be notified of an infection spread in those locations, so they also don't have to risk their lives in order to be able to just go to work. And it's one of the challenges when it comes to public safety officers or medical staff in the front line. They get time off, they get support in order to be home. Essential workers in the ag industry get $0 and zero support in order for them to stay home, knowing that they live paycheck to paycheck and that there's no rent relief or mortgage relief for them.
Steve, would you like to address that? I'd like to give you an opportunity here.
I would love to address that because probably, and maybe Miguel is unaware of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It's mandated by the federal government. The employees don't have to pay the salaries of those who have to stay home. The federal government is taking care of that. It's a project. It's been underway for months, and it's extended through December 31st. So any employer with 500 employees or less are mandated to pay the price of the daily wages of these employees.
Steve, could you broaden our perspective on the Central Valley and tell us what your constituents are saying about the virus and its impact?
Great question, Priya. The people that I represent, as you might guess, are split 50-50 on COVID-19. We are told daily with phone calls, why aren't we doing more? And then we are told daily on phone calls, why are we overburdening people? So we've got people who believe that coronavirus is a hoax. We have other people that believe if you step outside of your front door, you're going to come in contact with the Black Plague. We know that both of these are not accurate, that we are fighting a true pandemic, but at the same time, we have to be aware that we have to keep our government and our economy running as well.
Steve, what are your own thoughts about the virus and about wearing a mask?
I'm probably right in the middle. I've been wearing my mask in the right times since the governor mandated nearly a month ago. And so when I'm in public spaces where I'm not able to social distance, I wear a mask. I don't wear a mask in my car. I don't wear a mask in my office. And I feel I'm right in line with the majority of my constituents.
Miguel, there seems to be an ideological split that is driving policy decisions that are being made every day. Is that accurate? Do you see an ideological divide? And if so, could you describe that for us?
It's absolutely accurate. And I'll give you an example. When the public health director a few months ago mandated mask wearing in the county of Fresno, the Board of Supervisors overturned his decision and made it optional for people to wear. That has been a big difference for us as a city, because we understand that as the city that has the majority of the population in our county and the large employers, we understand that if you give the option to residents, they will not comply. Secondly, we've been very aggressive about enforcing business closures that are not supposed to be open, like gyms and indoor dining, where the county has chosen to look the other way and not do any enforcement of the state emergency order. And lastly, the way I would describe it is our city has spent our CARES Act dollars in providing direct relief for residents so that they can stay home. For example, we're providing $5 million in housing relief funds. We're providing millions of dollars for childcare for essential workers. We're ensuring that small businesses have the resources that they need, and we're spending the $20 million in additional testing and tracing, all things that most cities have not done, where the county of Fresno has only directed $5 million for small business relief funds of the CARES Act. And I just want to point out finally, Steve is right, the supervisor is right that employers should be giving their employees time off. The challenge though is that approximately half of our agricultural workers are undocumented, and the federal government has indicated that CARES Act funds cannot be used on undocumented residents, knowing that that is the half of the workers of our essential workers in agriculture that maintain the food supply chain in the country.
Okay, Steve, so a few different topics here that have been addressed. Let's talk about the enforcement of the rules to close when necessary, the way that money has been spent, and this question of undocumented workers and supporting their needs.
Absolutely. Let me start with the undocumented workers. Priya, that is beyond our pay grade at the Fresno County Board of Supervisors. We would blow through every last penny of our CARES Act dollars within the next week if we had to support a healthcare system for undocumented workers. That needs to be addressed at the state and federal level. It's way beyond my pay grade. At the County of Fresno, we do not, like the City of Fresno, have a robust code enforcement team, and you'll find that throughout most counties. We don't deal with the same types of things that the city normally deals with. We don't have the bandwidth to make all these enforcements that the governor has demanded. Yet, since he has mandated those, we come more in line with his requirements and trying to meet the standards laid out to us. But our Fresno County sheriffs are spread thin. They're attacking crime at its source, and we don't have the bandwidth to go to every little restaurant where there's a complaint driven to make sure that they're shut down. The governor has a strike team in Fresno County. He can do that if he wants to, and he has been.
And that assistance is coming in, I understand, early next week. Just in our last few seconds before we go, Steve, would you just share with us what you know about that team that's coming in to help your county?
Yeah, that's called the United Support Team. It's different from his enforcement strike team. And the United Support Team is working via the phone with our public health officer now, our public health department. Next week, they begin in-person meetings. When they get on the ground in Fresno County, they're going to go over the problems and they're going to come up with solutions.
Okay.
And Priya, we welcome them in Fresno County.
Steve Brandau, Fresno County Board of Supervisors, Miguel Arias, Fresno City Council. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Apart from the human suffering wrought by the virus, there's also its devastating toll on the economy. The nation's gross domestic product fell nearly 10% in the second quarter. The Labor Department says there are now 30 million Americans claiming unemployment benefits. Compare that to the same time last year, when there were just 6 million people claiming unemployment. Americans unemployed due to the virus have been receiving an additional $600 of relief each week. That federal stimulus funding ends today, and there's no agreement yet on a new relief package. With me now by Skype is San Jose Congressmember Zoe Lofgren. She joins us from San Jose. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks.
So the enhanced unemployment $600 benefit ended today. There is bipartisan support to do something to replace it with some amount of money, and yet the measure still expired without a replacement. Is there an intentional slowdown, an intentional lack of urgency around this work in Washington?
I don't understand what the Republicans in the Senate are doing. We passed this bill, and it's not just the unemployment extension. It's also funding for COVID. It's relief for renters. It's helping out states and local governments whose revenue has collapsed so that they don't have to do massive layoffs and cutoffs of service, funding for the schools so they can do their job. We passed that over 2 months ago to give plenty of time to have discussions to reach common ground. They didn't even start talking till middle of this week. And they came up with something that's just completely inadequate. I don't understand why they would want to have the economy go further in the ditch. The economists tell us that if we don't pass something like the plan that we enacted 2 months ago, we're going to see a 3.5 to 4 point additional reduction in the GDP. That's not what our country needs.
You're chair of the Committee on House Administration, and voting security is one of the key issues on your committee. What is your reaction to the president's tweet yesterday suggesting that the November presidential election should be moved because of his concerns about voting by mail?
Well, the president has no say in when the election is held. That's done by statute and has been the same for a long, long time. We are not going to change the statute, so the election will be November 3rd. And that has been emphasized not only by myself chairing the committee, but even Senator McConnell mentioned that the president can't change the election and the election will go forward as planned. I don't understand the president, whether he's trying to divert attention from his pathetic failure in managing the pandemic crisis by, stirring up other issues so people won't watch his massive failure there. I suspect that's it.
You're also the chair of Subcommittee on Immigration, and as of mid-July, Immigration Customs Enforcement officials confirmed more than 3,500 coronavirus cases in its detention center. On its website, ICE says that it's released more than 900 detained individuals to minimize the spread of the virus, and they're also housing detainees who are at risk of exposure separately from the rest of the population. Tell us about your reaction to ICE's handling of the coronavirus among detained immigrants and the reports that the agency is deporting individuals who test positive for it.
We had a hearing in the subcommittee about this a while ago, and it's a massive failure. Not only are they transferring people to foreign countries and spreading the infection around the world. They're also transferring detainees, and these are civil detainees, been convicted of no offense, around the country and spreading COVID throughout the United States, infecting not only the detainees, but also the staff. And of course, when the staff gets infected, they go home to their neighborhoods and infect their families and neighbors. So ICE has been a vector for the spread of COVID. We had suggested that they release all detainees who don't pose a threat. They not only didn't do that, they didn't even answer the letter. They are not testing. It's really a massive failure.
Last month, the Supreme Court saved the DACA program from being ended by the Trump administration, at least for now. What do you say to young undocumented immigrants who would like to apply for relief under DACA but cannot do it because the Trump administration is not accepting new applicants for it right now?
Well, there's a lawsuit right now, and the district court in Maryland has ordered ICE to reinstate the program as the United States Supreme Court directed. So right now, the plaintiffs in that case will go back to the district court. I personally think it looks like the department is simply defying the order of the United States Supreme Court. They argue that they have some wiggle room, so we'll see what the district court says about that. I would hope that Dreamers will have faith in the future. The election is less than 100 days from now, and we could have a different approach after November 3rd.
This week, Attorney General Barr testified before the House Judiciary Committee, which you also sit on. What's your reaction to the use of Homeland Security forces in Portland, where they've clashed with protesters for weeks, and the Attorney General's defense of sending those federal troops?
Well, it's an extraordinary abuse of power. I don't think this has ever happened in the history of the United States before, where federal police, without jurisdiction, really have been sent into American cities over the objection of the governors and mayors to essentially guard against vandalism and graffiti, and with that pretext have then gone into other parts of the city, arresting people and brutalizing them. I think it's worth noting. I mean, there were problems in Portland, no doubt about it, but the insertion of the federal presence actually instigated a further reaction. It made things worse, according to the mayor and the governor, and now those forces are going to in retreat, which I think is helpful. No one defends vandalizing a building or graffiti, but the response to that has been extraordinarily overdrawn, and I think it has instigated investigations by the Inspector General, and we will see what he concludes.
This week, Texas Congressmember Louis Gohmert revealed that he's tested positive for the coronavirus. And this comes after he had made comments about not being willing to wear a mask. And then he said, well, he might have gotten it from handling the mask so much. Why has wearing a mask become so politicized? And how is it possible to keep the country safe when even politicians are not willing to follow the guidance of the health officials?
Well, Louis' view on that is just dumb and unsupported by any science. He not only has infected himself, he may have infected other people, not only members of Congress, but staff in the House. Everybody's getting tested. So that was Louis being super dumb, which is not the first time, unfortunately. Why he would take that position, I never would try and explain Louis' thinking. But I think, the president has tried to make the wearing of a mask a political act when it has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with health. And all of the emerging information indicates that wearing a mask provides a level of protection, not only for others if you are infected, but for yourself. So why people wouldn't do that is beyond me, and it's helped prolong the epidemic and delayed our ability to get back to some more semblance of normality.
Congressmember Zoe Lofgren, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
A new documentary highlights the struggle for press freedoms in the Philippines, where many journalists are under attack by President Rodrigo Duterte. Leading the fight against Duterte is Maria Ressa, an award-winning former CNN bureau chief, whose media organization has been targeted by the government for exposing a brutal war on drugs that has claimed thousands of lives. Ressa and her team of reporters have faced death threats, arrests, and multiple legal challenges. In June, Ressa was convicted on libel charges, and this month, lawmakers refused to renew the franchise license of the largest news broadcaster in the Philippines. With me now by Skype from Baltimore is the producer, writer, and director of 1,000 Cuts, Ramona Diaz. Ramona, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Priya.
Ramona, the viewers here know a little bit about President Duterte. He certainly has a reputation for being an incredibly violent leader and his war on drugs. He's very popular locally. Tell us about this tension that has arisen between him and the journalists there, in particular Maria Ressa.
Well, Maria Ressa and her organization, Rappler, was really the first one who questioned the drug war. They questioned the numbers, right? Because the administration was saying the numbers were closer to 4,000, which is in itself still a very horrific number. But human rights organizations, peg it at more like 27,000, 30,000. So there was a discrepancy, and they started questioning that. And the minute they questioned that, they were pounded.
What does pounded mean? What did that look like?
They were pounded. Maria talks about it in the film. She got like 90 hate messages per hour. 90 hate messages. So who were these messages from? From trolls. But these trolls were amplified by people who were allied with Duterte and the administration, like Mokausan.
And there was an incredibly strong power of social media that's very present through this film. I want to watch a clip now where the president berates one of the journalists from Rappler, which is the news organization that has been publishing documents against the president, his war. It's the one that Maria runs. Let's take a look at that and come back.
Just because you have the power of press freedom, you are a Filipino who has allowed to abuse our country. And you are an active participant of that. Ayan ang mahirap. In the name of the Holy Grail of press freedom. Yung amo mo, anong kaso niya? Gago kayo. Yung inyong mga reporter, they will be allowed to criticize us. But you go to jail for your crime.
There's sort of a chilling analogy to me as I watched that with how the President of the United States has attacked the press over and over again here. Were there familiarities for you also?
Absolutely. When Trump called CNN fake news, Duterte called Rappler fake news a few days later. So they're probably playing off this, they have the same playbook. It's very, I go back and forth between the Philippines and here. And if I sit here in the U.S. and I watch CNN reporters being arrested on live television, I sometimes forget where I am. It's become so the same. It's alarming. And we knew that while we were filming, that there was something very similar about the two countries.
And you also explore social media's outsized influence on the election there. We've obviously had our own issues here in this country. What are your concerns going forward into the election in November with the effects that social media could have here?
Well, I think that social media has been weaponized, right? And there is no longer any public space where we can have discourse, like reasonable discourse, because I think we're all in silos. We only see the things that people we agree with. As Maria says in the film, it isn't really about content, right? Because if you go after content, that's a whack-a-mole game. You'll be playing that forever and once you put something out there, it'll always be out there, even if you put it down, right? If you take out your tweet, say, for example. But it's a network that you have to look at, the network of sharing and how one account can really influence thousands and millions of other accounts. And the spread is like, I hate to say it, it spreads like a virus quickly and exponentially. So it's very hard to control.
And so Maria fights that by putting forward alternate content that she and her journalists feel very strongly is the truth.
Yes, but the thing on social media is bad news and anger and hatred spread so much faster than boring truth, right? Or the less insightful, right? For some reason, they spread faster on social media, anger, and people share it faster. So really, the problem is with the social media platforms, right? The engineering has to change.
And to come to today's news and what is happening around the world, President Duterte has instituted one of the longest and strictest lockdowns in Asia to stop the spread of the coronavirus. How has his handling of the pandemic impacted his standing there?
Okay, they are on their 19th week of lockdown, the longest, right? And President Duterte's response to the COVID is really like his response to the drug war. It is a police response. It is not a public health response. And it has really affected it because the economy's tanking. People are very unhappy. He's also shut down the biggest broadcaster in the country in the middle of the pandemic. And so people are starting to realize that what they fought for in the 86 People Revolution are fast slipping away. And there is a kind of anger that's being, that you're noticing. There are a lot of protests, even if they can't, they stay in their cars. They're noise barrages. But people, I think, are starting to wake up in the middle of a pandemic.
Ramona Diaz, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
1,000 Cuts opens next Friday, August 7th, with virtual screenings in the Bay Area and around the nation. For more information, visit 1000cuts.film. You can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/KQED Newsroom. I'm Priya David Clemens. You can reach me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Priya D. Clemens. From all of us here at KQED, thanks for watching.